come previously to a course like this?
No.
A lot. No? Okay. So anyway, I haven't told you my name. I'm Tim. Okay, Tim, short for Timothy. Please call me Tim. Probably best if we try and close the door. Yeah. I'm sorry, I won't ask your names. It will be impossible. But anyway, nice to meet you. We're going to look at reading, and we're going to look at reading from a couple of different perspectives. Before I do that, just can I quickly check where you teach? How many of you teach in universities?
Yeah.
So you're teaching students of other subjects like engineering, chemistry, economics, and maybe some of their studies are
Foreign literature.
Economics, for example, is taught in English? Or no? You're just helping them with English language, pure and simple. Okay.
I deliver course of lectures on foreign literature, especially English and American.
Oh, right.
Century.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Where's that?
19th century and the beginning of 20th century.
Excellent. Fantastic. What a wonderful subject.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
Very good.
How many do any of you teach in secondary school?
Yeah.
Yeah. Secondary school teachers? Anybody primary?
Yes.
Some primary teachers as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Together, we combine.
You combine them? Wow. So you have several hats to put on, depending on which classroom you're in. So the age range you're teaching is from
7
until
17.
17. Wow. So is that typical in Russia?
Yes, quite.
Typical. So, and you will have each year, you will have a slightly different combination of classes.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah.
We can, it
Could
could be.
Could be.
Could be.
Okay. Depends on the size of the school, perhaps.
Depends on lots of factors.
Many factors.
Yeah.
Okay.
Age 7 and 8
Right. Interesting.
It depends on the policy of school.
So the things that we're going to talk about today were probably more relevant to teaching of secondary and higher secondary and university students and adults, of course. Let's just quickly, I want to ask you a question. Can you just say some of the things that you have recently read, some of the different kinds of text that you have recently read in your first language, in Russian? Just name a few kinds of text.
What do you mean?
Well, for example, this morning I read the newspaper.
A detective story.
You read a detective story this morning? Okay.
No, this morning.
It can be today or in the recent past, over the last week. Things that you have read in Russian.
Yesterday I read a biography.
Biography, okay.
Science fiction.
Science fiction, okay. Anyone read the newspapers recently?
Article in the magazine.
Well, we can go back in the last 3 weeks. So that includes being in Russia. Yeah? Newspaper readers, put up your hands if you read the newspaper. Any few of you? Okay. Any other texts that you've read recently?
Literary criticism. Some books are literary criticism
critics,
and
literary criticism.
biographies, yeah.
Okay, right. Yeah. So a mixture of technical and novels and information about day-to-day events like newspapers. Okay, so you've been reading about history. All right. Okay. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. All right. Some of the questions you may find more logical than others. I want you to tell me what you think about the questions afterwards. Okay. But in the meantime, please just answer them. So, for example, you've read about history. Were there any interesting new words that you encountered?
From the books?
Yes, in the book that you read. Any- Yes.
Yes,
For example.
I'm sorry.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what tense most of the text that you were reading was written? What use of tenses was there? What were the typical tenses? Again? Someone different. Someone else, I think, put up their hand before. The newspaper in Russia, in Russian. Anyone read anything recently?
In Russian?
Yeah.
I've read Russian,
before
yeah.
coming here. Yeah.
I read.
Can you tell me one interesting story that you read recently?
Don't remember, yeah.
Or one particular topic?
Interesting.
What are the Russian newspapers talking about at the moment? What are the current events?
They said about the salaries for teachers, yeah.
Ah, right. That's particularly
And they
interesting.
said, so they were going to high our salaries.
To
yeah.
raise them?
Yeah. To increase from the September, but now they say that it's impossible, yeah, for maybe for a year, maybe for two.
So false,
Yeah.
false promises.
Yeah.
Is it possible this was a political move to make everyone feel a bit happy? And then,
And then say
I
wait.
don't really
they say
know.
wait?
because it's-
yes.
There are plenty of specialities, for example, governmental clerks and something like this, who want the salary more than
Right.
the teachers, yeah?
Of course. Okay.
I think so.
Want or maybe get.
Yeah, they want.
So we had two different kinds of questioning here. What did you think about the questions that I asked to the lady over there on the side of the room? What did you think? What was your opinion about these questions?
Strange question, maybe a little bit.
A little bit
A
strange.
little bit strange
Yeah.
because you were talking about the literature in our native language,
Hmm.
and I don't remember what she has read. Was it?
It was on history. You were
On
reading on
history.
history, weren't you?
Yeah, that they might. So some words might have occurred.
Yes.
Because it's a special reading, special type of reading.
But quite
It's
rightly,
not-
she said that she didn't focus very much
Yeah.
on the specific words in the text or the kind of tenses used because that wasn't what she was trying to do. Yes, okay. What about the questions concerning newspaper stories? What did you think of those stories?
Yeah.
More logical?
Yeah.
Okay, any
Much
particular
more
reason?
usual.
Because we are interested in the context of what the person is reading, so
Yes,
the
absolutely.
information is so important for us.
Yes.
Since it's something that's happening just at this very moment.
Absolutely,
It's
absolutely.
just a question you can ask anybody in everyday life. If
Of
a person
course.
has read something, so has there been anything interesting in the newspaper?
Of course, yeah. So, and I was asking about reactions.
Yes.
Right.
And what he
Yes, as
thought,
well.
what his response was
Yeah.
to what he read.
General information.
What do we generally, I mean, this is the typical conflict between form and meaning. Often in language teaching in general, there is a kind of struggle, a fight, between concentrating on form, which is the structures, the vocabulary, the pronunciation of language, and concentrating on meaning, which is what is the message that is being communicated. Now, what do you think we do more of when we're teaching English
Depends.
So we should,
in general?
so we should do this more, but I'm afraid that we do much of this work.
We do a lot of this, don't we?
Yes.
And we maybe don't do as much of this as we could. We do maybe a little, but not as much as we could. Let's take another example. I'm going to show you a text that you probably won't understand. Okay? It's written in nonsense English. If you don't recognize many of the words, don't worry, they don't exist. They exist for the next 2 minutes only. Okay? In fact, it sounds rather good, so I'll read it. The whisper fouled, Rad spat a gog along the pranty fadant, when one did frack a clompy flute and crade a prutobon. A clonk madoon whapped up a half, and zany flots cambottled. Amat, azat, could they be wrong for hilligs long ago?
It isn't really a skirl. No?
Sorry?
It isn't really a skirl.
I think it's sort of influenced by Lewis Carroll. Yeah, a little, you know the Jabberwocky poem, yeah, which is similar to this. If you're interested in this wonderful poem, you should read it. Look it up. It's on. It's called Jabberwocky, and it's a Lewis Carroll. It's very, very similar to that idea. Now, did you understand it?
At least
Something happened.
vaguely.
Something happened.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Someone.
Well, let's see how much you understood. Okay.
Between a man and a woman.
Can you answer that question?
The whisker
Scroll
fold.
forward.
The whisker fold.
The whisker folds is the answer to number one. Okay. Can you answer number two?
Yes.
Spandagog, absolutely. Can you answer number three?
When
Frank.
Frank.
He read upon the foot.
Yes, he did indeed. And what happened next?
Walked up a half.
No.
Created
A half is the
half.
answer. The Congmadoon is the one that was doing it, I think. Yeah, so a half is the answer. Possibly, yeah, and I think just a half is the answer, yes. What kind of Madoon was it? Yeah, the worst kind of Madoon. Perhaps the most dangerous. Okay, let's try another one. A can bottle. Yes, very sad. It sometimes happens. And finally?
The mat is that?
It might be a matizat. Yes, I think it's probably a matizat, okay? Which sounds like a funny mixture of Latin and Russian. I don't know why. It does. Okay, and then finally.
Long ago.
For Alex.
Alex.
Alex long ago.
Okay, right. Now, it's interesting, you all said that you couldn't understand it, and yet you've answered 8 questions on it in a way that would be perfectly satisfactory in an English language. So I'm sort of making the same point that we were making over here when I was interviewing you with those rather strange questions. It's perfectly possible to manipulate language, to demonstrate mastery of structures and of vocabulary, without having the slightest idea of what the text is about.
Thank you.
Yes. And very often, using a very primitive kind of course book, in a perhaps rather traditional approach to language teaching.
But you answer this question, so at least something will help you.
Yes, absolutely. But all you've done is you've demonstrated mastery of form, but at the expense of any kind of real understanding. No one really can say very much about this text apart from something happened. And the Whisker of Fowls was part of it. So the point I'm trying to make is, yes, we do have to understand small details of text in order to understand the full message. But we can't just do this. This isn't enough. This doesn't really help students with developing their reading skills. Okay. Slightly different perspective now. I'm going to show you a couple of pictures. All right.
A Dalmatian dog.
Cow.
A dog.
A Dalmatian.
Dalmatian.
Any other ideas? Spilled coffee on a piece of white paper or something.
Dirty spots.
Dirty spots. Aren't all spots dirty?
Abstract picture.
An abstract picture, yeah. Jackson Pollock, perhaps. Squeezing paper. Okay. Some of you were right, actually, with your previous guess. But I'll show you one more part. It's the same picture, but it's a different part of it.
Dalmatian.
You still think of Dalmatian? Okay. Any other ideas? Does anyone still think the abstract picture? Still the abstract picture?
Maybe bare trees in winter. Something
I like that very much. You know, maybe in a Siberian forest.
Yeah.
Yes, beautiful. You have such beautiful forests in Russia. It's very good. Those silver birches that go on and on and on. Wonderful. Okay, let's try another one. That's the full picture. So those of you who said Dalmatian were absolutely right.
Oh, great.
If you can't see the Dalmatian,
We can.
but there's always apparently 1% of any group of people cannot actually see the full picture. So if you can't see the full Dalmatian, don't worry, it's natural. Okay?
Just belong to an exception.
Only his left hind leg.
Yes! You can't really see his left hind leg, can you?
The upper
Yeah.
part is
Because it's sort of merged with the snow. But it's interesting that you say that he has got a left hind leg. Yeah, I mean, you definitely don't think he's a three-legged dog.
No.
So you hypothesize that there is a fourth leg, and you hypothesize that it... I don't want you to do that. Stop. You hypothesize that it's over there, okay? Because of the position of the other legs, correct?
Yeah.
Right. Now, That's actually interesting because that's what we do with texts. We do the same thing. Just very quickly, I showed you this before, but you weren't sure what it was. Can you see what it is now?
Legs, front leg.
Front legs and?
And the part of his head.
Yes, yes. You can see that that's his head there, yeah? And you can see that that is his ear.
Yeah.
So even though you didn't really recognize it before, now that you know what the whole is, you can see more clearly what that particular detail is. The same thing happens with texts. If we understand the general framework, if we understand the general schema, the topic that we're reading about, and if we've plugged in our knowledge of the world about that topic before we start reading, then the text is much easier. If we have no idea about that topic at all, if we don't have a kind of a general schema available for that particular topic, then we tend to be completely lost. And students who are completely lost when they're reading a text often are trying to work out what the text means sentence by sentence. In fact, if they're very, very, very poor readers, you'll even see them reading with their finger and trying to work out what it means word by word. This is all part of something called top-down processing and bottom-up processing. Are you familiar with these words? Top-down processing is that you have a general idea of the topic, of some of the issues in that topic, of the thinking about that topic, and so you can use that to help you understand the text. That's top-down processing. Sort of, yes. It is linked with the idea of deducing, yes, of course, and hypothesizing. Whereas bottom-up processing is understanding the details of the text as you read. In reality, we need to do both at the same time, which is called interactive processing. We need to do top-down and bottom-up processing in order to successfully understand the text. What were you doing in the text about the whisker fowl? What were you doing? As you were answering the questions, what were you doing in the text about the whisker fowl? Were you doing bottom-up or top-down?
Bottom-up process.
You were doing bottom-up. You were only focusing on details with no real worry about the actual general thing. And you didn't worry about the general thing because I didn't give you any questions about the general thing. I didn't say, describe the whisker fowl. Or what would you say to the whisker fowl if you met him? There was nothing like that that you had to do, so you didn't do it. You just did the bottom-up process. Now, we're going to look at these ideas. We're going to look at the idea of whether you talk about just form or whether you also focus on meaning. We're going to look at using our natural ability to top-down process when we work with texts with some practical examples. Okay? And we're going to look at typical pre, during, and post activities. And we're also going to look at whether the task asks you for comprehension, or whether it asks you for information sharing, or whether it asks you to respond. Now, when you talked about the news just now, I was interested to find out how you responded to that text, whether you were interested about the salary raise, or indignant, or surprised, or cynical. Okay? Another thing that we do with text very often is we share the information. You're reading the newspaper on a Sunday morning, there's no work, you're sitting at the kitchen table, your wife, husband, boyfriend, girlfriend, lover, brother, sister, aunt, uncle is sitting also in the kitchen with you, and maybe you read an interesting story in the newspapers and you say, hey, look, here it says that they're talking about raising the salaries for teachers. It's interesting, isn't it? And the other one said, oh yeah, tell me about it. Yeah, well, they say maybe as much as 5%. So that's sharing information too, yeah, which is a typical task that we do. Okay, time for you to do something, all right? This is your turn now. I'm not going to give you this one. I don't like it. I'm going to give you a different one. Okay, let's do this one. I've given you some words for the text. Not many. Obviously, there are lots of gaps. But the words that I've given you are in the correct order. What I'd like you to do is to read this, and then with the person next to you, maybe in twos, or it can be in threes if that's easier. Okay, twos and threes. I just want you to say what you think the text is about. Hypothesize. Try.
We know, really. We know that.
Do you know?
Yes.
Yes, we saw it, yeah.
If you know it,
Sorry, yeah.
if you know it already, then don't give away the.
Yeah, no, we will.
Good.
We have been to some courses about preparations for Russian state exams, and we had a lecturer, and she might have been to your lecture.
Is it important that they're right or wrong?
No, it isn't.
Not at all, no. All I'm doing really is just getting you to predict, getting you to hypothesize. And why would I do that? As a teacher, why would I do that?
To make us think in the right direction.
Yes, yes. Or maybe it doesn't even have to be in the right direction. As readers, as you know, especially when you're reading perhaps, what's a typical example? You know when you're reading the beginning of a very long novel, and often the writer starts in a place that is not familiar. They don't start with an introduction of what's going to happen. They maybe start sort of in the middle of the story. And you're reading it, you have to try and guess what's happening. You have to try and work out what's happening. And as you're doing that, you're making all sorts of correct guesses, but you're also making a lot of incorrect guesses, which is part of kind of warming up to the topic. So we're doing that here. We're slowly accustomizing ourselves, familiarizing ourselves with the topic. Let's try adding a couple of pieces of information. Now, could you again just quickly check your story with the same person? See if you still agree that it's what you said, or maybe you have to slightly revise your original hypothesis. What did you say in your group?
So we thought that these two people were sort of from Romanian football fan group, something like that, and they were watching TV. They were watching a match between Slovenia country and Czech Republic.
Right. Questions to the group. You could, if you liked, you could carry on adding more details. It's obviously a completely flexible activity, and you must do this activity as you think works best for your group and for the particular text. So, as you're now looking at the extra details, you're seeing that in fact you were kind of on the right lines, and that it is about two people being angry about the result of a football match. I'm going to skip ahead so you can see the whole thing. So two people were nearly killed when a Romanian football fan threw his TV out of the window. Gita Axinte
Got so angry.
got so angry at your side when they lost their World Cup qualifier against the Czech Republic, 1-0, that he picked the TV,
Said, no?
possibly. Yeah, they're all phrasal verbs, aren't they? Or no, sorry, they're all verbs. So when he picked the TV up and threw it
Out of the window.
out of the window. Okay. So we've slowly seen the text come into focus. What do you think happened next after this? Here's the man, here's Gita Axinte throwing the TV out of the window. What do you think happens after this?
Someone found it.
Someone found the TV. I have to say, we're not We shouldn't be too worried about the TV. It's only a television. What about the people below?
She didn't kill anybody.
No. What do you think the reaction was of the person downstairs? Because remember,
Surprised?
two people were nearly killed. So what do you think their reaction was? They called the police, perhaps. Called the police. They were surprised. Anything else?
They go upstairs and
They went to
were
hospital.
sent to
They were
person.
sent to hospital for the
It's
shock.
not very
Yeah. Anything else?
good from.
They might have
Okay.
been
Maybe
fans.
they went upstairs and explained to that fan that it's not very good to TV through the window.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
they- well, they
Please be
really
careful.
are.
Or at least, if you're going to go on television, could you say what you're doing?
Sorry.
Television coming.
Thank you.
Yeah?
They could also pick up some pieces of broken TV and throw back to the window.
And start a fight. Yes.
Revenge.
Okay. Well, those are all good guesses, but none of them are correct. Because actually what happened was Radu Demirgu, his neighbour, was discussing the match on the balcony below. Suddenly his brother shouted, "Careful!" And the TV set crashed onto the balcony, almost hitting the two of them. But Radu is not going to take any action against his neighbour. At first, I was angry with him. He could have killed us. But when he told me he had been watching the football, I completely understood. We had also been watching it, and I was furious with the Romanian team. Crazy.
Is it from New English File?
It is from New English File, yes, yes. So it's a nice story, although I think it's not in the new version. Good. What we did there was slowly look at the details of the story, try to guess what it was about, and we sort of enjoyed the different hypotheses that you had, didn't we? Do you think your students would enjoy this? I'm thinking upper secondary, university students. What aspect would they like about it, do you think?
Unexpected ending.
The unexpected ending, right?
Guessing? Guessing itself, predicting itself.
Predicting, yeah, okay. They're being asked to use their imaginations. They're also being asked to participate in the story. Sometimes when we put a text in front of students, or maybe we ask them to open their books on page 89 and look at the text, we don't really give them much participation in the event, do we? It's, here's the book, that's the text, read it. That's your job. But this kind of approach gives them a little bit more participation. They're sort of more, I think, involved in it. And also their curiosity is being provoked by this approach. Hopefully it's a more motivating way of teaching. Yes, good. Now, jigsaw. How many of you are familiar with using jigsaw reading as a way of dealing with reading? Yeah? Have you done this in your classes? Yeah? No? Okay. What do we mean by jigsaw?
Different pieces of text.
Yeah, putting together the different pieces
Yeah,
of a larger text.
Of a large story, maybe.
It can be a story. It can be two different texts on the same topic, so that we understand that topic from different perspectives. I'm going to do this activity with you. I'm going to do an example, and we can talk about how it works. One of the good things about this is it's good for information sharing, isn't it? So one of the things we typically do in our own real lives when we read is we react or we respond, like you, sir, with your feelings about the information about the pay rise. And also we pass on the information that we just read. Now, let's do this. How many are we? We are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 26 by 4 is 9. Yes, minus one smaller group. Okay. So 9, no, that's not. 6, 12 is this information. But you're only going to fill in one column of the information. I'm giving you a text on an approach to language teaching. So some of these are old approaches, okay? So one approach is grammar translation. Another approach is audiolingual. A third approach is total physical response. And the fourth approach is communicative language teaching. You're going to read your text and then you're going to answer the questions in your particular column. Only one column is relevant to you. And in order to fill in the information, you'll have to discuss. Because sometimes the answers are in the text, and sometimes you have to sort of really deduce it from the text. Teaching the form, the grammar, the vocabulary, or teaching the meaning, getting students to focus on communication. And then finally, how much tolerance of error.